Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nerdscape. I know I haven't posted in a while, but that is because I have been working on a brand new video for the Song of Ice and Fire community that is called A Song of Ice and Fire Iceberg Part 1. This video is inspired by Alt-Shift-X and Glidus. They have both been doing excellent work in the area of A Song of Ice and Fire theories. Alt-Shift-X had a very, very long stream they turned into a video with the iceberg, and this is going to be very similar to that. So if you hear anything that's kind of a repeat of that, I sit on the shoulder of giants. I said that before, but I really hope you enjoyed this. This is going to be a part one. I'm not going to do the entire iceberg today. As you can see, it's very in depth, and honestly, for the algorithm, it might be better if I split it up into multiple parts. So yeah, we're going to be doing the first and second tier. If you don't know what an iceberg video is, basically you're going to take a subject, in this case, A Song of Ice and Fire, and you're going to go through each little section here that someone has made up. This iceberg was created by a Redditor, and as you can see, it starts at the very top with things that are basically canon, like R plus L equals J, Faegon, the pink letter, etc. And you go all the way down and you get stuff like Tyrion is the time-traveling son of Daenerys and Drogo, and Sir Pounce is Azor Ahai. So without further ado, let's get into it, and as always, thank you for watching. So yeah, things that are basically canon. Let's start at the very top. R plus L equals J. So yeah, this is basically canon. Rhaegar plus Lyanna equals Jon Stark. I feel like if you're even a little bit into the Song of Ice and Fire fandom, you basically know what this means. But if you're not, let me try to break it down to you real quick. Basically, it's saying that Rhaegar and Lyanna had a relationship, and that led to the birth of Jon Snow. Now, what's interesting about R plus L equals J, though, is actually whether or not Rhaegar and Lyanna had a consensual relationship or not. Now, in the show, it was confirmed that Rhaegar had his marriage to Elia Martell annulled. So that is possibly what's going to happen in the book. However, at the end of the day, I don't know if it really matters. Because, as Varys says, power is a shadow on the wall. And if Jon can even just claim that he is the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, then if he can swing that, and it's not really in Jon's character to do that, but if someone like Bran or even Sam can swing that, it would be interesting. Some evidence for it, we get the Tower of Joy scenes in the Game of Thrones and Ned Stark's chapters. There's a bunch of just tongue-in-cheek, things that we picked up in the series, like Jon saying that bastards cannot share swords with princes when he's talking about Joffrey, when the irony there is that Joffrey is the bastard and Jon is the prince. There's a lot of stuff like that littered, especially in book one, littered throughout the series. And I really do feel like in the Winds of Winter, we're going to find out one way or the other, and it's probably accurate. But yeah, it's pretty much canon. Let's move on to the next one. Brynden Rivers is the Three-Eyed Crow. I mean, yeah, it's pretty much explicitly said. I'm pretty sure Bran even comes out and says it in A Dance with Dragons. But it's not, 100% explicit, so I guess there's other possibilities, and we'll get to them, further down the iceberg. But, I don't think that this is wrong by any means. Brynden Rivers, he was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch for a long time before he disappeared to go north of the Wall. So no one ever knows what happens to him. So it's pretty, it's relatively possible that he, became a tree man up there. And not only that, when he was Hand of the King, he was always said to have a vast spy network. Had three eyes in one. So I just think that it's very, very likely that he is. And that's why it's in this category. However, I think the more interesting question is whether or not Brynden Rivers is actually, a good guy. And I'm not saying black and white good because, we all have shades of gray in this story. But whether or not he's going to use Bran's powers for nefarious means, or if he's going to take over Bran's body come the end of the Winds of Winter. Because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for him to want to train somebody new in the power of the Three-Eyed Crow. So I guess we'll find out soon. I think it's probably likely that he's nefarious, but we'll get to that further down the iceberg. Oberyn poisoned Tywin. This is probably my favorite theory up here in the basically canon section of the iceberg. And that's because I really, really enjoy the politics side of A Song of Ice and Fire more than I enjoy the magical side. But that's just a personal preference. But yeah, I really enjoy this one. Basically, it's just saying that Oberyn wasn't 100% sure what was going to happen when he went to King's Landing because he had no way of knowing, about Littlefinger's plan to poison Joffrey and then Tyrion being blamed for it. And then, there being a trial by combat that would allow him to get revenge on the mountain. So he poisoned Tywin. And Oberyn is known for his poisons. But there's some evidence for it. The biggest evidence is that Tywin's body after his death by Tyrion is disgusting. It smells awful. The people who are attending the vigil for Tywin are always commenting on how it stinks and everything, and that leads evidence to the fact that Tywin's body is poisoned. And I really enjoy this one. It's never explicitly said what Oberyn and Doran's plan went for Oberyn going to King's Landing. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but unless you put into the perspective that he was there to poison Tywin. I love this theory. It's one of my favorites. I think it's basically canon. In fairness, I would probably put it down more in the maybe section because I don't think we're ever going to get an answer to this one way or the other, but I really enjoy it. And there is evidence to the contrary a little bit, and it's not even necessarily contrary evidence, but Tywin's body smelling could just be an allegory or a symbol of the fact that Tywin's legacy is stinking up all of Westeros. His funeral is in the book A Feast for Crows, so it does make that could be all that George is doing. But I don't know. I really, really enjoy it. Tywin was taking a shit when he was murdered by Tyrion, and that doesn't really mean anything, but it could be. I don't know. There's a whole lot of stuff you could talk about, ifs, ands, and whats, but yeah, I love this theory. It's basically canon to me personally. Let me know what you think down in the comments. The Gravedigger theory. This one is basically saying that Sandor Clegane is in fact alive, and he is working as the Gravedigger on the Silent Isle that we see in Brienne's storyline in A Feast for Crows. I really do like this one. Basically, just because it's a very good story beat for Sandor. Sandor is a character that was full of rage, full of murderous intent, very angry, but beneath everything, he just wanted to be a normal person. He just wanted to be happy. He wanted to be that knight that fulfilled all the fantasies he had when he was a child. And after his run-in with Arya, when we think that he died, and that it actually turns out that he's actually just living a peaceful life on a silent isle and basically a monastery, as a person digging graves for the people that were killed in the War of the Five Kings. I really, really enjoy it. It's a very good character beat for me. I think it would work very well for this character. And there is some evidence outside of the character work for it, like his horse being present at the Silent Isle and whatnot. But, I really like it. However, I don't think that Sandor's story is going to end at the Gravedigger. And we'll get to that when we get down further in the Clegane Bowl theory, further down the iceberg. But I really do think that, he is the Gravedigger. I personally think that Sandor is going to somehow end up a champion for R'hllor. That would work, characterly because he's afraid, he's afraid of fire and everything. And also, it's kind of ironic right now that he's working for the Faith of the Seven. But basically, that's all I got to say about that for the time being until we get a little bit further down. Sandor Clegane is the Gravedigger. Balon Greyjoy was assassinated by Euron. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. It's basically confirmed. The Ghost of Highheart, when she makes her prophecy, or when she's relaying it to the Brotherhood Without Banners, she says that she sees an assassin with a crow on its shoulders. Yeah, pretty much. Euron in A Feast for Crows says that he had a dragon's egg that he threw into the sea, which that doesn't seem likely, especially for Euron, who's kind of obsessed with dragons. Why would he do that? It's most likely that he used the dragon's egg to pay for the Faceless Men to assassinate Balon. And, he says that he's killed many brothers. He's killed many of his brothers. He's committed, kinslaying. So it's pretty much confirmed, and while this theory doesn't explicitly say one way or the other how he did it, it's pretty much, it's pretty evident that he probably used a faceless man. When you think assassin in A Song of Ice and Fire, you think the faceless man. And like I said earlier, the Ghost of High Heart scene, she says it wasn't Euron explicitly, it was somebody else. The faceless men are very interested in dragons at the moment, apparently. So, yeah, it all kind of forms together pretty well. Honestly, the Euron storyline, I know it's important, but it's not my favorite thing in the world in the series. But, yeah, that's all I got to say about it. Robert Strong. This one I think is just kind of say that Robert Strong is actually Gregor Clegane. And yeah, again, basically canon. We know that Qyburn was working on Gregor Clegane's body after his battle with Oberyn. So that makes a whole lot of sense. We know that Qyburn was exiled from, the Citadel for using necromancy, essentially. And there's and the biggest piece of evidence is Robert Strong is so freaking big, as big as the mountain, and there is literally nobody else in all of Westeros with that size. And if you think about it, if Robert Strong was literally anybody else, he was just walking around for the entirety of the War of the Five Kings and before the War of the Five Kings, and no one talked about him, no one brought him up. Like, yeah, no, it's Gregor. I'm sorry. Now, what's interesting is how other people are going to react to this, because it said in the Dornish storyline that they sent Gregor's head to Doran for basically confirming his death. But if Robert Strong wasn't if Robert Strong is Gregor, then that didn't happen unless Gregor doesn't have a head, which is also possible. There's a whole lot of Robert Strong is a very simple theory, but if you think about it a little bit too hard, it kind of sprinkles out into bigger storylines elsewhere. I think it's gonna be interesting to see the Sand Snakes show up to King's Landing and see Robert Strong, because they more than anybody are going to be interested in that. So yeah, we're gonna see how that ends up in the Winds of Winter. But yeah, Robert Strong is Gregor Clegane, basically canon. Faegon. So yeah, this one is basically saying that the character that we know as Aegon Targaryen is actually fake. Ergo, Faegon. So yeah, again, this one's basically canon. When Dany goes into the House of the Undying and she sees all those visions, one of the visions that she sees is, the Mummer's Dragon. So that's, evidence. A lot of people think that Faegon is actually going to take King's Landing from Cersei, and then when Dany shows up, that's going to be when she sees the quote-unquote Mummer's Dragon. There's a lot of evidence. However, there is a lot of evidence that also says that he isn't necessarily a Targaryen, but that he's a Blackfyre. And that, the Blackfyres do have Targaryen heritage, so it's not like he is a complete faker in terms of the bloodline. But, yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. There's a ton of evidence for it, like Varys saying that he raised Aegon to be the perfect king in his mind and everything, which, where would he get Aegon? How would he have snuck out Rhaegar's youngest son or I guess eldest son if you think Jon, but anyway, how would he have done that without anyone knowing? There was a bunch of people at the sacking of King's Landing back when Tywin sacked it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but what does make a whole lot of sense is if he had a Blackfyre who had gotten pregnant and then he turned that child into the perfect king. That makes a whole lot of sense. So yeah, and like Varys says, power is a shadow on the wall. If people think that Faegon is actually the rightful king, if he actually does everything perfectly, then it doesn't really matter. Probably not. So yeah, that's all the evidence for Faegon in a nutshell. If you want I might make a whole video about Faegon because it is very interesting to me. But yeah, let me know. The Pink Letter Conspiracy. Oh boy. Alright, so for the Pink Letter Conspiracy, I've made an entire video talking about who I think wrote the Pink Letter. But if you're new to the series or you just want a basic rundown, basically it's saying that we don't know who wrote the Pink Letter. It could have been Ramsey, it could have been Wyman Manderly, it could have been Mance Rayder, it could have been Stannis, it could have been a whole host of people. And the reason this is kind of important is because, it directly leads to Jon being assassinated. It's not the only reason, but it's kind of the catalyst that brings it on. If you want to know who I think wrote the Pink Letter, just check out the card up the top right there. But yeah, and the reason that there's a lot of people question who wrote the Pink Letter is because there's a lot of inconsistencies in the letter. How the author addresses Jon, how he has certain information. It's all very interesting. But yeah, if you want a full detailed breakdown, I have like a 30-40 minute video about it up there, so check it out. Parallels between each culture's legends. So yeah, there's a lot of parallels, a lot of symmetry between all the cultures in A Song of Ice and Fire, and this is actually very interesting to me from a world building perspective because George put a lot of energy into something that he really didn't have to. For example, you had the Golden Empire of YT that fell during the Long Night, apparently, just like Westeros apparently did at one point. You had the five forts that very much mirror the wall, and my theory behind this is, with a lot of legends in the real world, you see one thing that could be another, and they're actually the same legend, just broken up between different cultures' interpretations. Like, in our world, we have Bigfoot and the Yeti, which, are essentially almost the same thing in a lot of ways, but because they are in different parts of, in this case, America or North America, they are called different things. Also, from, like I said earlier, like the world building perspective, it makes a lot of sense. For the Long Night, especially, to be a cultural phenomenon throughout the entire world, I really do think that the Long Night is something that is a global problem. It's going to start in Westeros for sure, but if it had actually gone from, let's say it went on for 100 years, there's no way Essos would not have been affected by this, in my opinion. And there's a theory that the five forts, that are in eastern Essos are actually just the back half of the wall. Like, it's another section of the wall. So if you go up far enough into the lands of Always Winter, if you keep on going north past that, you'll actually eventually end up at the five forts. I like that theory a lot because it shows that other cultures are prepared for the Long Night again. I don't know. And like I said, this will probably never get expanded upon, in my opinion. Honestly, this theory probably belongs maybe in the going deeper section or even the maybe section of the iceberg. But yeah, I think that it makes a whole lot of sense in terms of the world. We're never going to get an answer on it, probably. We just don't have enough time in the series. And we're probably never going to go that far east anyway, or that far north, I guess. But yeah, it's really interesting to me. Something that we don't have to have, but it's there and it adds a richness to the story. Daenerys is Azor Ahai. So the thing about Azor Ahai is I don't ever think we're going to have a line on a page in any of the books that says Daenerys Targaryen is Azor Ahai, Jon Snow is Azor Ahai, or anything like that. I think Azor Ahai is actually probably going to be quite a few different people, and I don't think we're ever going to find out for sure which one it is definitively. However, if it's going to be anybody, it's going to be Daenerys, simply because she has the biggest threat to the White Walkers and the others, because she has the dragons, and she is the first Targaryen to birth dragons in so many hundreds of years. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense, but I don't think we're ever going to get it one way or the other. So to say it's basically canon is a little bit iffy to me, but yeah, but like I said, if it's going to be anybody, it's going to be Daenerys. Lyanna Stark is the Knight of the Laughing Tree. So yeah, in the Storm of Swords, in the Bran chapter where we get the tale of the Knight of the Laughing Tree, it's never confirmed that it's Lyanna, but I feel like it's pretty confident. We in the fandom are pretty confident that it's Lyanna, just because she hides or the Knight of the Laughing Tree hides their face very well. They have a very feminine voice. Lyanna is always described as being very brave, very good at horseback. In A Dance with Dragons in the Bran chapter where we see Lyanna, she is very, for lack of a better term, she'd be very masculine in the sense of A Song of Ice and Fire terminology. And she just, she was looking out for her brother's friends and everything. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. She's probably the Knight of the Laughing Tree. What's interesting, though, is if she is the Knight of the Laughing Tree, how does that work with the whole Rhaegar thing? How does that work out with him choosing her as the Queen of Beauty at the Tournament of Harrenhal? How does that all kind of fit into that story? But yeah, most likely. Yeah, she is. Alleras the Sphinx. This one is basically saying that Alleras the Sphinx is actually just Sarella Sand, one of the sand snakes, in disguise. And yeah, it's pretty much canon. Alleras and Sarella, their names are each other spelled backwards. And I really do think it just Yeah, that's what it is. However, what I find interesting is the why that Sarella disguised herself to go to the Citadel. And here's my take on it. And Alt Shift X said basically the same thing. That so Sarella, she just wanted to learn some stuff. And while I really do love all of the plot twists of A Song of Ice and Fire, of one person being someone they're not, you get, Ramsey being Reek in book 2, and you get Jon and being a Targaryen, and all these other things, and the Gravedigger is Sandor, and Robert Strong is Gregor. Like I love all those things, but I think it would be really cool if Sarella was just pretending to be somebody else for absolutely no nefarious reason. She just wanted to go learn some stuff at the Citadel. She wanted to be a maester. She wanted to learn, and she realized she couldn't be a woman and go to the Citadel and learn. So she just changed her identity to go learn. And I just think it'd be really cool if we had one character who was just doing something on her own with absolutely no bad reason behind it. I think that'd be really cool. However, with all that being said, she probably is going to be tied up in the Sam storyline come the Winds of Winter. They're at the same location. So, yeah, I really like that theory a lot. And, I mean, the Alleras and Sarella theory is basically canon, but the theory that she's just there doing her own thing for her, own reasons, yeah, I like that a lot. Dany is the rightful queen. So here's the thing about that is I don't think there's any rightful ruler of Westeros when it comes to the Iron Throne. So for example, if Cersei was the perfect ruler and she was the person that was making every right decision, making every right call, doing everything the right way, she would be the rightful queen. Same with Faegon, like Varys once. Like Varys says, power is a shadow on the wall. I think the term rightful ruler is very subjective. So yeah, and the other thing about that is, even if you take that aside, R plus L equals J is 100% almost basically canon. So that puts, Jon, or, if you go by the show, Aegon, as the rightful ruler of Westeros. So to say that Dany is the rightful queen, I don't know, it doesn't quite sit right with me. Don't get me wrong, Dany has a claim, but I just don't think that she is the rightful queen, in my opinion. And all you Dany stands can yell about that in the comment section down below. But yeah, I don't think so. Frey Pies. Oh yeah. Frey Pies is basically canon. So what this one is saying is that in A Dance with Dragons, we have a storyline where a bunch of Freys go missing on their way up north. And then a couple of chapters later, when we get to a scene in Winterfell where they're having a feast, Wyman Manderley basically had kidnapped, murdered, and cut up those Freys, and then fed them, or baked them into pies, and then fed them to other Freys. So there is a lot of evidence for this. When the Frey Pies allegedly scene is taking place, Wyman Manderley orders for the Ratcuts story to be played while he's eating. Wyman Manderley says he's very happy with how the pies turned out, etc., etc. It's basically true, and I love Wyman Manderley. He's probably my favorite character, like my favorite non-POV character in A Song of Ice and Fire. And I really do like the idea that he He wanted revenge for the Red Wedding so bad that he just killed some random Freys who probably are never going to be, investigated about their disappearance, and fed them to somebody else. I think it's very, very Manderley to do that, and it's kind of funny in a very morbid way. Also, Dance with Dragons has a lot of cannibalism motives going on throughout the entire series, or throughout the entire book, rather, because we have, Bran eating the Night's Watch people unknowingly, him potentially eating Jojen. We have Theon potentially wanting to eat his fingers, a whole bunch of stuff. There's a lot of cannibalism going on, and that just kind of fits the mood of A Dance with Dragons to say that, yeah, Wyman Manderley fed Freys to their brothers and kinsmen. The Battle of Blood. This theory is saying that we're going to have a battle between Euron Greyjoy and the Red Wine Fleet. And we basically see this start to play out when we see the Winds of Winter sample chapter, the Forsaken, from Aeron's point of view. And the big theory behind this one is the Battle of Blood is going to be a landslide victory for Euron. But the point of the battle wasn't for territory or money or anything like that. It was actually so that Euron can use the blood from the battle as a blood sacrifice for some reason. And that reason, a lot of people theorize it could be to raise a giant Leviathan-esque, squid from the, or kraken from the depths of the water below. It could be a sacrifice to Blood Raven. It could be a sacrifice to, the others. It could be a whole host of things. But yeah, the Battle of Blood, the battle itself is definitely going to happen. There's no question about it. But what Euron is going to do with it is a whole other story, and I'm really excited come the Winds of Winter because we're going to have a whole bunch of battles in that book, and I'm really excited to see how those play out. And finally, the last entry on the basically canon section of the iceberg, the Queen of Thorns poisoned Joffrey. So yeah, in the show, the episode right after Joffrey was murdered, we basically get the confession from Olyenna. However, in the books, the only indication that we get explicitly is that Littlefinger says he was working with Olyenna to do it. And, granted, Littlefinger isn't the most trustworthy source with a lot of things. But in this case, I'm pretty sure we can take his word on it. And it makes a whole lot of sense. The Tyrells were very concerned that Joffrey was very monstrous, was going to abuse Marjorie. Not only that, he'd be very difficult to control. And it just would have been easier if Joffrey was off the page, off the map, And yeah, it in my opinion, it's 100% canon. Like I said, I really, really enjoy the political side of A Song of Ice and Fire, and the chapters towards the end of A Storm of Swords, where we get all that political maneuvering with Oberyn and Tyrion and Joffrey and the Queen of Thorns. Everything is amazing, and in my opinion, it's basically canon, and we'll probably see that revelation, that confession, come probably the Winds of Winter, if I had to guess. Yeah, probably the Winds of Winter. All right, down to level 2, the maybe section. And these things are not necessarily canon, and a lot of these will probably never ever be 100% confirmed one way or the other. And it's going to be a lot of symbolism, a lot of just us guessing. But I'm very excited. So, without further ado, Jon, Dany, and Tyrion all have a lot of similarities. So, yeah, but that could also just be, George, that's just his writing style. Jon, Dany, and Tyrion are the 3 main characters of A Song of Ice and Fire. So, of course, they're going to have similarities because George is writing them, with that in mind. I don't think there's any deeper meaning behind them. They all have really terrible lives going on at the moment. But, yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. Maybe you could say that they're the 3 heads of the dragon. Probably. That's the most common theory when it comes to that. Dany definitely is. If Jon is a Targaryen, probably. And Tyrion has a lot of knowledge about, dragons and everything. So if you want to really reach and say that they're the 3 heads of the dragons, and that's why they all have similarities, there you go. Ramsey castrated Theon. So in the show, again, it's explicitly said that Theon was castrated by Ramsey. However, in the books, it's not. But by that same token, it is implicitly said to the point where we can pretty much, figure it out on our own. So yeah, the evidence in the book, Theon says that Ramsey has taken a lot from him, fingers, toes, teeth, and one other thing that he doesn't say explicitly, but we can pretty much guarantee that it is his penis. And then on top of that, during the what's it called, betting scene between Ramsey and Jane, Theon says, Ramsey tells Theon to make Jane wet in the only way that he really can, and that is with oral sex, not penetration. So yeah, it's pretty much what it is. It is what it is. Sorry, Theon, man. Theon's my favorite character in the series, but man, that sucks. Benjen equals cold hands. So Benjen and cold hands in the show, yeah, it's canon. In the books, not so much. And I can almost guarantee that this is actually not the fact, because there was a sample chapter, or editor's note rather, from George to his editor when his editor had asked, is Benjen cold hands? George says no. So cold hands, Lady Guinevere has a very good theory about who cold hands is. Go listen to that at Radio Westeros. I am very curious about what happened to Benjen. I think it's likely that he's probably dead, and that he was the first real on-page victim of the White Walkers, or not on-page, but rather the first victim of someone that we would really know and care about. So yeah, Benjen equals cold hands. It's not a thing, but it's cool, I guess. The Valonqar is Jaime. So yeah, I 100% agree with this. I think from a storytelling perspective, this is 100% true, because Cersei is always on the lookout for Tyrion, because Tyrion is the little brother that's going to, bring to her death. Yeah, but it makes a whole lot more sense for it to be Jaime from a storytelling point of view. It makes a lot of storytelling irony for it to be Jaime, because she's constantly looking out for Tyrion, but in fact it was Jaime this whole time. And in the Valonqar prophecy, it says that they'll choke the life out of you. Jaime only has one hand, so that's very ironic in a lot of ways. And yeah, Valonqar is Jaime 100% in my opinion. There are some other theories. It could be Sandor because he's a little brother, or whatnot, and so forth. Or it very well could be Tyrion, because Tyrion definitely wants to. But I just think, from a storytelling perspective, Jaime being the one to kill Cersei would be a perfect end to both of them, and it's just very good storytelling. Jojen Paste. So Jojen Paste is the theory that while they're in the cave of the Three-Eyed Crow, the Children of the Forest slash the Three-Eyed Crow kills Jojen, mashes him up into a paste, and makes Bran eat him to unlock his third eye fully. Right? So the theory here is basically because Jojen was a green seer, he would be able to unlock Bran's full potential. And like I said earlier when I was talking about the Frey Pies theory, there's a lot of cannibalism motives in A Dance with Dragons. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Not only that, Jojen was being very melancholy throughout his entire on-page appearance during A Dance with Dragons. He was pretty confident he was going to die. And I think even if the Jojen Pace theory isn't accurate, Jojen's definitely dead in some capacity. And I think it would be, character-wise, a very good character move for the Jojen Pace theory to be accurate, because then Bran is going to have to deal with the idea that he ate his good friend Jojen. How's Mira going to react to this, etc., etc. So yeah, I think it's probably true. Pate Jaqen. So yeah, at the end of A Feast for Crows, when Sam shows up at the Citadel, he runs into Pate the Pig Boy, and that's a bit of a problem, because we know from the prologue of A Feast for Crows that Pate is actually dead. And it's pretty evident from all the evidence we get in the Arya chapters of how the Faceless Men killed their victims, that it was a faceless man who did it. And in this case, the faceless man is taking on the appearance of Pate. And the description of the faceless man in question is very similar to Jaqen. So yeah, Pate equals Jaqen, pretty much confirmed. The big question here, though, is not whether or not Pate is Jaqen, but why. Because why are the Faceless Men interested in the Citadel? And there is a very popular theory that they're interested in how to defeat the dragons. Whether or not they are personally invested, or that they have been hired to take out Daenerys' dragons, that's a whole different question. But in terms of this specific theory about Pate equals Jaqen, yeah, 100%. Bolton. So the bolt-on theory, I have no idea why it's this high up on the iceberg, but I guess. The bolt-on theory is saying that the Boltons are actually skin-stealing vampires who they attack each other, they attack other people, put their flesh on themselves to stay young forever. Again, I don't know why this is so high on the iceberg. It wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world, because we get things like skin changing and warging that is kind of similar, I suppose, in a metaphysical context. And the Boltons have been along almost as long as the Starks, so maybe their ancestors were really jealous of the Starks' ability to skin change, and they're like, you know what, we're gonna literally skin change and be just as good as you at it. I guess I don't think this is true. And even if it were true, I don't think that Roose or Ramsey are going to do it. But yeah, I guess. There you go. Septa Lemore is Serra Mopatis. So this goes back to the Faegon theory. Basically, it's saying that Illyrio and his second wife Serra, one of them was a Blackfire, most likely Serra, and they gave birth to Faegon, which makes him actually a Blackfire, not a Targaryen. And then this theory is saying that, unlike what Illyrio says, that Serra died from a plague, she actually went into disguise to take care of her son as Septa Lemore. And the evidence for this is that Septa Lemore does not act very much like a Septa at all. She's very promiscuous. She's very flirtatious. She's more of a warrior in a lot of ways than a Septa should be. And I do think in character it makes a lot of sense for a mother to want to be close to her son and to take care of him in that way, but she can't do it as his mother, so she does it as a Septa. That makes a whole lot of sense. But I just don't think we're ever going to get it, on page. Yes, Septa Lemore this whole time was Serra Mopatis. I don't think we're ever going to get that. But I think it makes sense, if it's true. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Gerrion Lannister is the Shrouded Lord. So the Shrouded Lord is a mythical figure in Essos that bestows the Grey Kiss, that gives grayscale to his victims. And a lot of people think that it could be Gerrion Lannister this whole time. Gerrion Lannister was actually the youngest brother of Tywin, who probably in his early 20s went off to Essos to find the Lannister Valyrian sword Bright Roar, and he never came back. So a lot of people think that he ended up, in Essos and he got grayscale, and he just kind of is, one of the grayscale warriors now. And there's not a whole lot of evidence for it. I personally don't think this is true. I think the Shrouded Lord is a lot of things. For one, it's just a myth that people are associating with different people. Tyrion associates it with Tywin, for example. And not only that, I think the Shrouded Lord is meant to be a literary use for Tyrion to get over Tywin's abuse in a lot of ways. So yeah, I don't think Gerrion Lannister is, the Shrouded Lord. I don't think that's the thing. The Night Lamp Theory. Okay, so the Night Lamp Theory was proposed by the very popular Song of Ice and Fire theorist, Brynden B. Fish. So the Night Lamp says that Stannis is going to use his military knowledge to defeat the overwhelming host of the Bolton and Freys by luring them to a frozen lake just outside Winterfell by using a night lamp to draw them in. And then when they're all standing on top of the ice lake, he's going to crack the ice, and they're all going to, drown in the icy waters below. So I like this theory a lot. Militarily, it makes a lot of sense. Stannis is a very good military leader. And there is that one line in A Dance with Dragons where we see Stannis' men cracking the ice, and they don't really understand why they're doing it, but Stannis is still ordering it. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. Basically canon to me. I'm very excited to see how that plays out because it's going to be like probably the last win that Stannis gets. So yeah, I like it a lot. Dragons are wyverns. So yeah, to me this makes a whole lot of sense. To me, wyverns are just the far east version of dragons. And if you think about it, it makes a whole lot of sense for there to be like some evolutionary variant of dragons throughout the world. And wyverns are probably just that. They're probably just a cousin to the dragons. I mean, we see that in our world, right? That's how evolution works. We have cousins of different creatures that are very similar, but not exactly genetically the same. But yeah, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And when I was talking about parallels between each culture's legends in the section above, I think that's just another example of the world building about how different parts of the world are very similar to the world that we see, but it's just, we see it from a different lens and everything else. So yeah, I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Basically canon. Patchface prophecies. So I said earlier that Wyman Manderly is probably my favorite non-POV character in the story, and that's true. But Patchface is up there with it too. I think it's very, not fun by any means, but very interesting that when Patchface was traveling to Storm's End from Essos and their boat sank, that he became the prophet for the Drowned God. George puts in the story very often that being a chosen leader for a god, to be a martyr for that god or anything, is not a good thing. I mean, you look at Beric Dondarrion, who's losing his morality, he's losing his soul every time he comes back from the lore. Melisandre certainly isn't happy, and you get a bunch of that stuff. I really do think that Patch Faces, being the prophet of the drowned god makes a whole lot of sense, and it's just very sad. But talking about his prophecy specifically, he does predict the Red Wedding, which is very interesting. He does, he doesn't. Okay, we can't say he predicted Hearthome because Hearthome hasn't happened yet, but he basically did, as far as we can tell. So yeah, I think that his prophecies are all very accurate, very, very true. But I just think it's very sad that he became the prophet of the drowned god, and now his entire life is ruined. And every time he tries to warn people, like, "Hey, the Red Wedding's about to happen. Hey, the others are approaching Hearthome. Hey, all these very awful, terrible things are happening. Please help." No one listens to him, and I think that's very sad. But I like the character a lot. Jon is Azor Ahai. So like I said when I was talking about Daenerys being Azor Ahai, I don't think we're ever going to get a page where we see, yes, X character is Azor Ahai. But the evidence for Jon, he is if the R plus L equals J theory is true, he is the literal A Song of Ice and Fire. And it would make sense for him to be the prince that was promised. I do think that it is likely that he will kill Daenerys to temper Lightbringer. I think that is a very likely thing that's going to happen. And honestly, now that I'm talking about it more, if any character was going to be Azor Ahai, I think it's Jon, and Daenerys is the red herring, if that makes sense. Jon Con is the Beast of Stone. So the Beast of Stone is another vision that Dany sees in the House of the Undying. And I think that, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. Jon Con, he has grayscale, which, people say turns you to stone. That makes a whole lot of sense. That vision is concurrent with the Mummer's Dragon, which is the Faegon theory. And Jon Con is a very prevalent character in the Faegon storyline. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. I am curious whether or not George is going to take the grayscale thing and turn it into an epidemic through all of Westeros, because I don't know how that storyline is going to meld with everything else going on. But in terms of him being the Great Stone, the Beast of Stone, I 100% think that's an accurate thing. But I just don't know where that's going to go. It could also be that Melisandre is right and that she actually gives life to stone dragons that breathe fire. That's another interpretation of the Beast of Stone. But I think in this sense, it's literally going to be Jon Con. And like I said, I don't know how George is going to put in an epidemic if that's the way he goes. Because by the time that Faegon gets to Westeros, it's probably going to be, or when he gets to King's Landing, rather, it's probably going to be like the middle of the Winds of Winter. And to have an epidemic sweep through the land, the Long Night's probably not going to take very long after that to start. There's so much going on with everything. I just don't know how George is going to incorporate that kind of storyline into the story. But if he does, I'm sure he'll do it well. But for this theory specifically, yeah, Jon Con equals the Beast of Stone. Yeah, in my opinion, it's pretty true. The Grand Maester Conspiracy. So the thing about the Grand Maester Conspiracy is I definitely think that some Maesters are conspiring together towards the goal. I just don't know 100% what that goal is. But I don't think it's a Grand Maester Conspiracy. I don't think every Maester in the land is conspiring for one major goal. And we see that because, we have a POV from a Maester in Maester Crescent. He doesn't ever mention it. Granted, he was dealing with a lot in that chapter, but still. And Luwin never seems to give any kind of indication for it. And we spend a lot of time with Luwin. So I don't think that's a thing. Now, the Grand Maester Conspiracy could actually be referencing a lot of things. It could also be referencing the fact that the Maesters were behind the downfall of the dragons during the Targaryen rule. And that could be a thing. That could be that the Maesters believe that the world should be manned by science and logical thought and not magic. And so because of that, they, conspired to take down the dragons by, tying them up, by poisoning dragon eggs so they don't hatch, etc., etc. That can be a lot of things. But in the current story, I just don't think that there's going to be anything that happens with the Maesters. However, by that same token, I don't know why George would have put in the Barbara Dustin, you know, plot line or storyline where she talks about how the Maesters can't be trusted. So I don't know. It could go a whole bunch of different ways. I don't think there's a Grand Maester conspiracy. I think there's a Maester conspiracy where we have like maybe 24 Maesters working together on a certain thing. That could be a definite storyline. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think. I just have a hard time seeing how this is going to play out in the story. But it definitely could. I'm gonna put this one as like an iffy, like 50-50. It could happen in the story. Let me know what you think. So the Grand Maester conspiracy is very interesting to me. Melisandre can only see the future. All of their magical powers are tricks. So yes and no. Melisandre can definitely see the future. She just can't interpret it very well. And I think a lot of her magical powers are tricks. I think her lighting Lightbringer is definitely a trick. A lot of her, way that she presents herself is definitely a shadow on the wall type of thing. But I think she does have some magical powers. I mean, she was able to glamour Mance Rayder, very well. So most people don't even recognize him unless they're specifically told. And if the show is to be believed, she glamours herself daily. So that's, I don't think that's a trick necessarily. And I think the final nail in the coffin on this one is that she's probably definitely going to be the one that is going to revive Jon come the Winds of Winter. And that's definitely not a trick. It could go terribly for sure, but I don't think it's a trick, you know. So I think that this one is kind of true in the sense that yes, she can see the future / she has some magical powers, but a lot of them are tricks. That's how I'm going to lean on this one. Varys planted Shae. So this theory basically just says that Varys planted Shae into the Lannister camp so that he could have a spy, working against the Lannisters. And I don't think so. I think the Shae storyline works very well in that she was both Tyrion and Tywin's weak spot, and she herself was very good at manipulating that. But I think it's very in Varys' character to do it. I just think it's unlikely that Varys was the one to do it. Now, it could be that once, Tyrion came to King's Landing and she brought Shae with her and everything, Varys could have hired Shae to be a spy for him. I think that could be a very likely turn of events. We're never going to get this in the story, though. It's never going to come out one way or for the other. The only way it could come out is if Varys tells Tyrion. And I honestly think Varys and Tyrion will probably never meet again. They'll probably be dead. One of them will probably be dead by the time that opportunity presents itself. But yeah, I don't think he planted her. If anything, he hired her after the fact. So yeah, that's how I reckon that. Euron is the Dusky Woman. Okay, so this is definitely not true in my opinion. So the Dusky Woman was a gift given by Euron to Victarion, and I think it's basically true that Dusky Woman is spying on Victarion for Euron, but Euron is not the Dusky Woman in the literal sense. It could be very possible that Euron is warging the Dusky Woman, which, if you think about it, it's definitely the type of thing that Euron would do, where he would give a gift to Victarion for the only reason to spy on him, and then he would make the Dusky Woman actually be a powerful asset to Victarion just to flip it on its head later. It's definitely a Euron thing to do to fuck with his brothers like that. But to say that Euron is the Dusky Woman, definitely not. It could come up later that he's warging her, but yeah, no, not in my opinion. Syrio equals Jaqen. So this theory is saying that Jaqen the Faceless Man was pretending to be Syrio and was training Arya from the very beginning. The problem with this, though, is Jaqen was found in the Black Cells under King's Landing by Euron pretty well before Syrio would have died, so it would have been very difficult for him to be in two places at once. And not only that, I think that it's way better of a story, in my opinion, that Arya's magical teacher and Jaqen stumbled upon her just randomly out in the Riverlands during the War of the Five Kings. Because if you think about it, you have Bran, whose magical teacher in Book 2 was, Jojen, and then Sansa's magical teacher, or not magical teacher, but teacher, would have been like Sandor and Cersei. Jon had, Corn the Half Hand and all those type of people. They all had their teachers, but all their teachers were kind of looking for them in one way or the other. And I really like the idea that Arya Underfoot was just randomly found by a faceless man and that he wasn't looking for her. I like that a lot. So that would Syrio being Jaqen would kind of underplay that a little bit for me, and the timeline doesn't work. So yeah, for me, definitely not. Red Wedding 2.0. All right, this is kind of a fun one. This is saying that Lady Stoneheart, or Catelyn Stark, is orchestrating a Red Wedding 2.0 to get revenge against the Freys. So there is a Frey wedding coming up that's mentioned in A Feast for Crows, and a lot of people think that Lady Stoneheart has put her men in the Frey camp to get intel about this wedding, and then when the wedding takes place, she is going to execute all the Freys in a very similar manner that they executed the Stark cause. Yeah, I don't really know where the Lady Stoneheart storyline is going, but I think if it goes that direction, I wouldn't be disappointed because it makes a lot of sense. I want Lady Stoneheart to meet one of the Stark children. I think it would be very fun if she met like Arya, when Arya comes back from Bravos to Westeros, or specifically if she meets Jon, that would be very interesting. But if it just goes, Rebellion 2.0, she kills all the Freys, and then she somehow dies, whether that's to Brienne or one of the Brotherhood without Banner, something like that kind of happens, I wouldn't be disappointed. The Faceless Men caused the Doom of Valyria. So I don't think we're ever going to get a one-for-one answer on what the Doom of Valyria actually was. But in A Feast for Crows, or maybe it was A Dance with Dragons, it was one of the two. I think it was Feast. The kindly man is talking to Arya and explaining to her what the Faceless Men are and how they came to be. And he tells her that the Faceless Men came to be because the slaves of Valyria were wishing for death, and the followers of the many-faced god, granted that wish upon him and killed him. And Arya asked the question, well, why didn't you just kill the masters? And the kindly man responds with, we did, but that's a story for a different time. And a lot of people think that is, referencing the fact that they caused the doom. And I think, that makes a lot of sense. That is a pretty good explanation. And with the evidence that we have set up of what I just said, that could very well be what happened. But I just don't think we're ever going to get an answer for it. But if you want to get a one-for-one answer, that's probably the closest you're going to get. Jon Snow is the rightful king. Like I said, Dany being when I was talking about Dany as the rightful queen, I don't think there's any one rightful ruler of Westeros because, power is a shadow on the wall type of thing. But again, like I was talking about with Dany, if there was going to be anybody, it would be Jon. I mean, he is, if you believe that Rhaegar and Lyanna had a consensual relationship and Jon is not a bastard, but a true-born son, he would be technically the rightful heir to Westeros. I just don't think he's ever going to sit on the throne. I think that's going to be very similar to the show where he just doesn't want it. And I don't see how that plays out. I think the R plus L equals J thing, I think that is more going to line up with Jon being Azor Ahai / the prince that was promised than it is going to be him being the rightful king. And finally, on the second tier, we have Old Powers Are Waking. And again, I don't know why this one is in basically canon, because, yeah, the Old Powers are definitely awakening. We have a bunch of stuff happening. We have the dragons being revived. We have the others coming back. We have Euron with the potentially the Battle of Blood raising the giant kraken out of the sea. The Alchemist Guild are talking about how the wildfire is, being able to be produced in such higher quantity because old powers are waking. Yes, old powers are waking. Now, I think the bigger question is what puts them to sleep in the first place, and if we can do it again. Because honestly, I think come A Dream of Spring, all the old powers are going to go back to sleep for maybe another 100 years with the dragons dying, the others being defeated, Euron being defeated, everything going back to the status quo that we had at the beginning of the series. I think that's likely what's going to happen. And I think the biggest question is how to do that. And it could be Bran doing his, magic stuff. I don't know. But I think that's the bigger question. So yeah, with the end of section 2 here, the iceberg, that's going to bring us to the end of the video. I know I kind of skimmed over a lot of these, mainly because a lot of these, especially in the first 2 sections here, are going to be things that are basically just true, and there's not a whole lot I can say about them other than the fact that they're true. I really hope you enjoyed this. Part 2 will drop very soon, I'm hoping. I already have it recorded and everything. I'm kind of just seeing how the feedback from this video is. But, let me know about any of these theories down in the comment that you have questions about or you disagree with me about. Like, subscribe, please. It means a whole lot. It helps with the algorithm so much to see you guys do that. And I would really, really appreciate it if you guys, reached out more. So, yeah, like and subscribe. Please check out one of these videos up here in the card. I have done a couple of videos on A Song of Ice and Fire. I've done 2 parts on a Theon analysis. I've done a video about the pink letter that I'm really proud of. And I've also done like a few videos to this point of a Harry Potter literary analysis. So if Harry Potter is your jam, definitely check it out. Fair warning though, full of spoilers. So yeah, thanks guys.